Hello and welcome to the very first episode of TFS Insider 2025.
This is the podcast where we dive into the world of fashion, explore different career paths, and of course, give you an inside look at the fashion show. In each episode, we sit down with industry professionals to gain insights and advice that can help shape your journey.
Today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Kelly Reddy-Best with us. Dr. Kelly Reddy-Best is a former Iowa State fashion professor and the former chair of the AMD department.
Welcome, Dr. Kelly. We are so excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm so good. How are you guys?
Good. Well, to start things off, we'd love to hear about your background. What sparked your interest in fashion and how did you pursue a career in teaching?
Yeah, I always was interested in fashion. Largely when I was young, it was in the making side. And when I was thinking about college, and I honestly didn't have much guidance in that area. And I uh, was looking on my own, and one university, actually the university I went to for my undergrad, came to my high school and said, "We have an option, and it's called fashion merchandising." And I said, "Great, I'm going to do that," because it was something that I was interested in. And I ended up going for fashion business, which I didn't quite understand what it was at the time. I didn't really understand what fashion merchandising was. And then I got there, and then I was like, "Oh, this is great. I'll move to New York, become a buyer," or because I grew up in New Jersey, moved to Rhode Island for my undergrad, and then I was planning to move to New York City, or maybe Philadelphia. And then I took a fashion history course with Professor Valdea at Johnson and Wales, and that then sort of changed my whole trajectory. I was really interested in like what people wore and why, and that's sort of what led me to the path of like going on a master's degree where I could like read and write more about fashion and what people wear and how they feel about it. But I mainly focused on textile conservation there. Went for my PhD, and then I got a job, and then here I am years later.
That sounds really great. So, I heard that you said you started in fashion business.
Mhm.
Why exactly? Like, I know you said you heard about the program fashion merchandising, but were you more interested in the business side or more of the creative?
Honestly, at that point, I did not like I didn't really know the difference. To be honest, I didn't understand. I was really young, and I again didn't like we weren't going on like college tours to like think about what college to go to, or like brainstorming majors, or like thinking of pros and cons. Like that just like wasn't happening in the household in which I was growing up. So I sort of like self decided that I would go into something that I knew I liked. Like I knew I liked making and sewing. And then I knew it was connected to fashion and merchandising. I was like, well, this sounds like it could be related. So then I honestly just asked my parents to drop me off, and I told them, "This is the address I need you to drop me off at." And they did. And yeah, and then once I got there, I was still a little confused, honestly. But it started to make more sense, but it really started to make sense when I took fashion history, because then I could understand like it was a Euro-American global fashion history, much like we have here, but it talked about like all the different aspects of fashion over time. So like production, distribution, consumption, regulation, subject formation. So, but like on like a global scale, and I was like, oh right, trade and tariffs, and here's why things were happening, and then it kind of put the like contemporary fashion system like in context for me. And that's when I really started to understand like, oh right, it wasn't just like you go into a store and you buy things off the rack. Like it evolved over time because of a lot of different political, social, economic issues that like influence like how and why things are made, and like where they're made and why. Um, so yeah, that kind of so it all kind of worked out in the end. And I would say I just sort of like always followed like what I thought was kind of interesting and things that I liked doing. So I always liked reading and writing. It was always like something I was really interested in, and I was always interested in like curious about learning about like the bigger picture of like why things are happening. And so fashion merchandising, while sort of different from what I kind of do today, and what I thought I'd be doing today, helped lead into like my understanding of like the system at large on a global scale.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds amazing, honestly. I never would have thought of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just said like, fashion merchandising did help you lead to a more wider perspective on things. So, what exactly did you realize like, oh, like there are so many like social issues and ethic issues in fashion, and like what made you want to like, think, oh, I want to teach, the future of fashion to students, and just what was your journey around that?
Yeah, so I would say my first year in college, so I took a lot of classes and I was in my undergrad and I was taking both like my gen eds, I was taking, I don't know, environmental science and, all these things that you got to take to gain a perspective, which is important. At the time, I didn't quite understand like why I was taking all those courses, but now I understand. And then I realized that what I was going into, what I was learning was kind of the exact opposite of some of my core values and beliefs, which I didn't like quite understand yet because I was still again like learning about who I was and like where I came from and then like where I was going. And it was hard for me to like understand that. So I but at the time, I remember at the time it was like my second semester in college. So I'm a first year, second semester. I'm taking like, I don't know, like the legal environment of business and fashion. And I'm like, what is this? Like it was interesting, but it was the lines like weren't connecting for me. And I just remember thinking, wow, I do not want to go into this horrific capitalist freight train of which the fashion system is. So then actually started applying. I transferred out for a semester, and I uh, I transferred out and I applied to like all these schools, and I was going to study. It was after I'd taken fashion history, and then I took all these. I applied to be a history major. I don't know. I was thinking about other things that I could do, that because I didn't think that this was going to be for me. Like I didn't feel like I like the people who were in my major weren't. I wasn't like really connecting with them. Like I had a few friends, but I had a very different interests. Even though I knew I liked fashion, it just wasn't like connecting with my fashion merchandising cohort. Like we, we didn't have similar interests, I suppose, as how I could put that. But so then I actually transferred out and I went to Rhode Island College for a semester, and I was, I think, undeclared, but I was thinking I might go into history. And there I took, it was like Women and Gender Studies 101. And that was pretty much like a life-changing course for me. We read Audre Lorde's book, Zammy. I forget the exact title, but it was a first. I didn't grow up in a household where we were talking about like feminist issues or any, in fact, any issues at all. That was the exact opposite of what was happening. I didn't even know like what feminism. I mean, I knew what it was, but like I didn't quite understand. And then when I took that course, I was like, oh, I can have this perspective. That was like a pretty life-changing course for me. Even though I got like a C minus in it. It was like I did which is like for any undergrads, it's like horrifying. You're like, oh my God, I'm like failing the course. I got to see. I was like average, and then I realized like, oh, and then when I was there, I worked at the costume shop, like the theater costume shop. Because like, oh, maybe I'll do history and theater costume shop stuff. But then I realized like, I really don't want to do that. Like I'm more interested in consumption of fashion and from a different like from the way that we might understand it in fashion merchandising and design here. And so then I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back. So I ended up going back to my undergrad at Johnson and Wales and finishing my degree in fashion merchandising. And then I talked to my professor and I was like, I'm going to come back. I'm going to do this. But I really liked your history course. And then she's like, oh, you can do a master's degree and you can like keep learning about fashion history. And I was like, great, I'm going to do that. And then And then she introduced, I only applied to one program, the University of Rhode Island. Um, that was the only one I knew. It was close by. Like there was no like real reality of me like moving across the country or applying to all these schools because like cost money to do all of that. So then I like was thinking about all that. I worked it out, and then really I began. That's when it really, after that women and gender studies course, that's when like I really started like thinking about those kinds of issues and kind of like just reading on my own um and like learning about that because my classes weren't critical in nature. I was in a business school, so it was in fact the exact opposite of that. It was capitalism and not justice. I could describe it very succinctly. It was exactly not justice. There was no mention of that ever. Uh, I don't remember ever like there was no even. I mean, at the time too, it was like I graduated in 2006, so I was there from 2002 to 2006. So like sustainability like wasn't like also really big in a lot of the fashion programs. I don't think anyway. Although I've never really looked at the history of that, but I don't think it was. But they weren't doing that. Um, so yeah, and that's largely. And then when I started my PhD, then I was my major professor for my master's degree was like, oh, you know, if you like learning, you can go on for a PhD. And I was like, oh, great, like I'll apply. So then at that point, I applied to all these programs and got in and got like funding. And at that point, I still didn't understand that you get a PhD. Like I kind of understood that you get a PhD and you become a professor, but like it wasn't totally connecting for me. Um, and so then I went to the PhD, still didn't have a super critical, but then I discovered the like queer studies minor, and I never declared it because I it was I don't know why I didn't do that. Like I just it's like a student thing, you know, you think you're gonna do you should do it and then you don't do it. Like I took the classes, I just never declared the minor. And that's so I took all these classes that at that point.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point. It's like the people you meet in your life, like they have a really big impact on you and how you see the world. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and even still today, like right now I'm learning about literally this morning, my past student, Amanda Ortiz Bello, she's from Puerto Rico, and we're writing a book together on Puerto Rican Bamba fashion. So I'm, you know, learning about the whole history of Puerto Rico and things I didn't know that I definitely should know, but I don't. So yeah, I'm definitely learning about like settler colonialism and like Puerto Rico. It's like Puerto Rico is a territory, so it's like ongoing. It's like continuous. Like things I was like, wow, I should know this about Puerto Rico, but I did not know.
That's a really amazing opportunity to like write a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm excited. It's really cool. It rooted from her master's thesis when she was here at Iowa State. And then she did such a great job. I was like, I think we can turn this into a book. I was like, you want to do it? And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, all right, hell yeah, let's do it. So then we turned it. Then I was like, all right, let's put the proposals together. We got rejected twice from two publishers, and then the third one picked us up. So, you know, you just got to keep applying. So you're gonna get rejected, you know.
So I guess that like kind of brings us to our next question of like how did you like come to Iowa State University and how did you become part of the clothing and museum textile with
Yeah, yeah. So I, right out of my PhD, I finished my PhD at Oregon State in 2013. And then, and in that point, I had no publications. I had just earned my degree. And so, like, to give you a sense, like, many PhD students leave their PhD with like publications and all this stuff. And I just was trying to finish the degree. And so I finished it in 3 years, learned a lot, of course, but then I'd written my dissertation on queer women's fashion and everyday styles, negotiations, and like identity. And so then after that, I think that kind of like launched me into this trajectory where I am now, which again roads back to all these like different experiences, but the the after I finished after I finished my PhD, I just applied to a bunch of jobs. Like a lot. I applied to I don't know how many jobs. So and I had a bunch of interviews. Like I went on all these interviews and on campus interviews, and I'm like trying to finish my dissertation and do these interviews that's like 3 days long, where you have to do all this stuff and like present yourself and your future. And I'm like, I'm just trying to be like right here, right now, trying to finish my dissertation. So you're trying to get me to talk about like the next 5 years of my research. I'm like, but anyway, I did it, and I worked at San Francisco State for 3 years before this. And so I was like the person who I was the design person there. So I taught all the design courses from collections, illustration, construction, draping. I also taught global sourcing, history. I mean, I taught everything there. And then after the third year, San Francisco is pretty expensive. So and I wasn't like really looking for a job, honestly. One of the faculty, I was at our main conference, and one of the faculty was like, "Oh, did you see our position?" And I said, "Nah, I mean, I don't know, I might have," but they're like, "Oh, you should apply." And it was like literally due like the next day. So I put my application I put my application in one day. I wrote my cover letter and put my CV in, and then they emailed me the next day and asked me to interview, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So then next thing you know, I'm like interviewing at Iowa State, and it's different. It's an R1 institution, which is like a heavy research institution. It's and San Francisco State, it's not. It's an R2, so it's a teaching institution. It's like really different. Um, and so like we teach more than we research. And for whatever reason, Iowa State thought that I had potential to do research. And then and then I went on the interview, and I liked it, and it seemed okay. I had never lived in the Midwest. I had never been to Iowa ever, except one time I drove through it. I'd always lived on the coast, New Jersey, near Philadelphia, Rhode Island, Oregon, San Francisco, and I was like never moving to the middle of the country like ever. And then I don't know, I got the job, and then I asked my husband, and then we decided to take the job here. And then it wasn't until 4 years in, or it was 2020 is when I took over the fashion museum, because folks were here before me. So I didn't do the fashion museum before that. I just taught and did research stuff. And um then I took over the museum, and that's what I did for the last, I guess, 4.5 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty amazing with all that like you've gone through just to like get here to Iowa State and be ahead of the textiles and clothing museum. So was it like when they offered you that like position, were you like very excited about it? Or were you kind of like, I don't really know what's going on, but sure.
I had mixed emotions. My husband's a Black person, and we lived in Oakland, which is mostly Black people. So moving to a place that's like predominantly white, working in a predominantly white institution, that was like I was a little hesitant about that. Actually, like not a little, I was heavily hesitant about that. Um, yeah, and yeah, it's a really different living experience here than in Oakland, where we lived, because we lived in like West Oakland specifically. And even my students, even like at San Francisco State, like most of my students were students of color. And yeah, it was, I don't know, I was excited to, I thought the job seemed really cool. Like teaching the fashion history, culture, social psych courses was really interesting to me. And like the resources that are available to do a lot of really cool stuff um, was really interesting. I wouldn't say like I was excited to move to Iowa. Although I really enjoyed my time here, and like what I've learned, because it's like I've met a lot of different kinds of people in the Midwest, and that I, I've made like a lot of friends, and a lot of my assumptions were challenged, because I, grew up on the coast, um, and yeah, it's been cool, but I don't know if I was I was excited about the job. I don't know if I was excited to live in a small town in Iowa. I would say that.
Pretty fair. Fair to say. Not most people are like out of state. So like I'm an out of state student. So coming to Iowa is like, wow, this is it. Like, you know?
Yeah, but it's beautiful, it's like the prairie is really nice and it's like really inexpensive, which is like really nice. Like
Big
yeah, because there is no way you could buy a house. And I mean, you have to be like a really rich person to buy a house in California. Like even the groceries, I mean, everything is just, I mean, yeah, I lived there from 2013 to 2016 and our rent.
Oh, did she cut out?
Like, and it was tiny, super, super tiny, the little apartment that
Sorry
we had. Oh,
for that moment. Do you mind repeating what you said?
oh yeah, it's just that my internet was unstable. Yeah, I would say that it's very inexpensive in Iowa, which is also exciting because California was extremely expensive and out of reach and contributes to the huge unhoused population problem that exists there.
So I guess with our next segment, mainly emphasizing on like fashion brands and social justice, one question that we'd had was looking at like brands and seeing how they can truly balance activism as well as still creating profit within that aspect, especially in like a capitalist system. We were wondering if you had any like thoughts or opinions on that.
Yeah, I think that is a tricky balance. I mean, you could certainly go the nonprofit route, right? But I don't think many folks want to do that. Like Worldly Goods over on Main Street, they're, I would say, like a model for, but they're of course a nonprofit. But what's really amazing about them is they center the artisans and the makers, right? So they do they partner with folks who are artisans and makers like around the globe, and then bring them and highlight them as part of their mission. So you can go in there and buy all kinds of like jewelry, textiles, um, mostly accessories, like bags, maybe hair accessories, things like that. And they ensure that the folks are paid a fair wage. But it's hard because you have to like think about a lot of different things. And they're nonprofit, right? So they have a board and they have like a collective decision making process, which is I think fantastic. And in my future life, if I was ever gonna like move out of academia, I'd probably do something like Worldly Goods. If I were to combine like my early background in fashion merchandising, and my like love of um, like art, like what people make and what they love about what they make, and like bringing that to the world for people to understand. But um, I would say when you think about like justice in fashion, it can be really difficult, even the brands that are like doing a really good job, because there's so many elements to thinking about justice. So it could be, and it's like you have to be like really able to like really connect the dots because it's everything from like the fiber, like where are, like if you look at one product, right, you could think about justice in a lot of ways, like water consumption, um who's like the land in which, if it's a natural fiber, right, the land in which the fiber came from, how did it come from that land, who was involved in that process, to like everything from like movement of raw materials to like produce the product, right? So how did that, for example, cotton get from, hang on one sec, you guys, I just have to let my dog out of the room. Hang on one sec. Okay, I'm back. And so so you could think about it from like a material perspective, right? You could think about justice because there's people involved in all of those processes. People are obtaining whether it's cotton or wool or linen, right? But not only that, right? You have to think about, well, what are the tariffs that are in place, or what are like what's the legislation that's in place to like move those goods between places, and who are the people who are impacted by that legislation, and are they marginalized, right? If we think about the whole history of, for example, India, right? I mean, British imperialism, and its relationship to the entire textile industry, textile complex there. I mean, it's like really complicated and horrifying if you really look at it. Basically, they were like making the people of India grow the cotton, like destroyed all their looms, and then exported it to Britain. They then were weaving it and selling it back to Indian people. And it's just like, what? Basically destroyed their economy. And so, there's like so many moving parts to it that like a lot of times you'll see brands just focus on one part of that, which is a great start. But I don't think there's really any. I mean, I don't know. I kind of think Really Good is pretty good, but even you could criticize them in some ways too. Um, but like, and then you could look at like other avenues, for example, like like there's been a lot of like queer and trans fashion brands that have like emerged like post same-sex marriage, and a lot of those brands are really about centering, like their emphasis on justice is gender and representation, right? And a lot of the folks who started those brands, they didn't necessarily like have a background in fashion. Some of them did, but most of them didn't. They were just like a queer trans person or a really strong ally, who wanted to create space. And so they were like, this is a need in the market, and like I need to make this stuff because of how heteronormative and transphobic the industry is. And so they were like, we're going to create these brands, but then it's like, we're going to produce over in this country, and we don't know where our fibers are coming from. They don't like have all the knowledge of like even post um consumption, so like during the consumer use, right? Like how often do they have to wash that product? Is it dry clean only, right? What about those dry clean chemicals, right? So I mean, it's just, but they're doing really good on their marketing because they have representation, and then they have like representation of fat people, black and brown folks, indigenous peoples, people with disabilities, right? So they're doing really great on that front. But then it's like, do they think about the fiber for like the raw materials? Like I don't know that they have. So I think it's like a really complicated balance of like what the brand focuses on. And I think in many ways that it's like a bigger question that like I think a scholar that someone needs to ask is like, there's all these fashion brands that are like interested in justice, but like they might just be focusing on one part of the system and justice as it's related to that. Which is great. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's complicated. And then of course I'm not going to diminish like queer and trans people like self-affirming, creating their own futures um, through money, right? So through making their own kind of right through supporting themselves through their own entrepreneurial spirits, right? I don't like diminish that. Like it's important. Like queer and trans people have experienced significant discrimination, and even today, it's going back right to that. So I don't want to like diminish that. It's like an important part, right, of like self-actualization. It's like creating opportunity for yourself and moving forward with that. But it's also intertwined with like the complexities of like the global fashion system.
That was really good hearing that. Okay, so we are running out of time, so we're just gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
And kind of just wanting to know if there's any like upcoming research or any projects that you have that you're excited about or have recently completed.
Yeah. I'm going to write a book on authenticity in fashion and the ways and like about like borders and boundaries and the ways that folks have um created notions of like what is authentic and what is like not authentic, and whether it's around like materials, aesthetics, um, and all the different parts, to just unpack like how sometimes when we create these boundaries around like who can do what, where, and why, it can sometimes lead to it can sometimes lead to, and this is what I'll think through a lot in this book. It can lead to creating more division in the world, versus like more understanding amongst like communities, cultures, and like different populations, both in contemporary times and in past uh, experiences.
Okay. And we do have one of our committee members here. Not to put you like on the spot, Lexi. Do you like have any questions for?
Don't think so. I guess like what's one of your favorite brands to wear that also supports like social justice and ethics in fashion?
Yeah, I'm more into the maker. So I'm more interested in like understanding, like buying directly from the person who like made it. So buying from places like Etsy is really fun for me, especially when they use like local resources. Um, uh, yeah, so oftentimes like I'll focus on, and I can't, it's horrible, I can't remember any of their names right now, but like a lot of the pieces that I'll have, or like a lot of things that I'll wear will be, I'll have like visited that person, and they'll have like made it directly, and they'll have like thought about where they source the materials from, or or I like look up, for example, um, maybe they'll like source the materials, the cotton or something, and then they'll like have spun it themselves and then woven it and then like dyed it. So and which I find, because then I know who I'm supporting, I know where they got their materials from, and that's more the route that I go. Although I will have to say I do love Stuzo clothing over in LA. It's a Black queer-owned brand, who produces both apparel items and lifestyle goods for the home. And so I'm always going to rep Stony, Stony Love, who founded Stuzo. And so if you all don't know who that is, you should definitely look her up. She's amazing. Well, I don't personally own anything from Stuzo, but I do love her brand and what she represents. And she produces locally in LA, which I think is really cool.
And then one last thing, do you have any advice for students or professionals interested in merging fashion with social justice?
Continually educate yourself always, and don't stop. When you think you know, keep going. And also read things that you think that that don't assume that you'll always feel a certain way or think a certain way. Always like, and surround yourself by a lot of different kinds of people who like are also interested in learning, so you can understand the complexities of like why they think the way that they do, because you might make an assumption, for example, about religion or different viewpoints rooted in whatever. And like, I think the best question to ask someone when you like differ from them is, what in your life helped you think that way? Like what, how did, why do you think, like, tell me about like, why do you think that way? Or why do you believe that? Versus like, I don't agree with you and I think that's terrible. It's better to ask like, why, like what helped you feel that way? Or what did you experience in your life that got you to that point or that way of thinking? And that then helps them kind of unpack like why they think the way they do, so you can like better understand each other, even if they're slightly aligned with you, but you're like, whoa, we just took a 180 and I totally disagree with you on this front. And then I'm like, well, why do you do that? And then it's cool because then you kind of learn, you're like, ah, yes. And usually it goes back to like colonialism and like imperial powers. Usually that's what happens, if you look into the history of it. So read a lot of history books, go to museums and like learn a bunch of stuff and like never stop learning, question everything and resist and follow your never compromise your values.
That was really great advice. I feel like that could be for like just anyone and not just those like interested in fashion and like social justice. That was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really great to hear your perspectives and see how much social justice and fashion is intertwined, especially in the world we live in today. And thank you so much for being here today and spending your time with us. We really appreciate you. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. I don't know, Chloe and Edgar want to make any other remarks or Lexi?
I mean, it was just really great hearing you talk about your upcoming and just hearing how you view things. It's definitely like opened my eyes. I know, I guess like with classes that we've taken, they sort of mention it, but it's not necessarily a humming point. And that's kind of what inspired us for this season of TFS is kind of being more open to talking about the like social injustice issues within the fashion industry.
I think it's great because there's a lot of justice issues that are happening right now. So I think it's really great to start learning about those things now and in the future because today's a great day to start
Well,
for
thank you
anyone.
for joining us, Kelly, and I hope to keep in contact with you throughout the years. But thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you later.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to our first episode of TFS 2025, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.